Was Jesus a racist? Wow. Does it shock you for me to even ask such a question? It seems disrespectful. We revere Jesus as the Son of God, the one who reveals God to us and even reveals God in one another. It is hard to even consider whether Jesus could have had such a large and human failing as to be a racist. So let me start by reassuring you, I love and follow Jesus. I trust that Jesus is sent by God to lead us to live our full human potential, the full potential of God's dream for humanity. I devote my life, my work, my heart to being a disciple of Jesus. I mean no disrespect by asking this question. On the contrary, I mean to challenge myself as a disciple with this question. I want to challenge myself and I want to challenge this congregation. And so I'm asking all of us to consider this challenging, difficult, disturbing even question. Was Jesus a racist? Earlier this year, we had an excellent sermon from Ian Paulson in which he challenged St. Dunstan, the church, the congregation of St. Dunstan's, to speak up on the issue of racism. He named our silence and challenged us to face our complicity with institutional racism and the ways that that has been present in our church and even locally in our congregation. The gospel reading for that Sunday was the story of Jesus sending the disciples out to preach the good news. And as he sent them in Matthew 10, verse 5, Jesus says, "Go nowhere among the Gentiles and enter no town of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of Israel." Ian called me when he was writing his sermon to ask about this verse. What does this mean? Did Jesus come only for the Jews? Did he forbid offering healing and forgiveness to Gentiles? Was he so racist that a Samaritan or a Canaanite would be beneath his notice? That sure sounds racist to me. The Samaritans were cousins to the Jews. They share the same ancestry of Abraham and Moses with the Jews. They read most of the same books of the Bible. Where they parted way was when the temple was sort of standardized and became the place for worship and sacrifice. The Samaritans rejected the authority of the temple and continued to make sacrifice in their own towns and in their own synagogues. They were and are to this day loathed by Jews as apostates and heretics, as those cousins who are just corrupt, who get it wrong. I once had a conservative rabbi, a man I greatly admire, tell me that the parable of the Good Samaritan was too offensive to be considered. So, was Jesus a racist? In today's gospel reading, a Gentile woman, a Canaanite, asks Jesus to heal her daughter, and Jesus ignores her. She persists, demanding, yelling for Jesus' attention, asking Jesus to heal her daughter, so much that the disciples come to Jesus and they say, "Lord, send her away, for she keeps yelling after us." And so Jesus turned and he said, "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." That same statement that he made when he sent the disciples out to share the gospel in the surrounding villages. I must say, as a Gentile myself, that sure sounds racist to me. Why won't Jesus even listen to this woman? He's been healing people and feeding people throughout Galilee. Why won't he heal this child? He refuses because she is a Gentile, a Canaanite. Well, the mother isn't taking no for an answer. She pleads with Jesus, saying, "Lord, help me." And Jesus doubles down on what can only be called racism. He says, "It is not fair to take the children's food and throw it to the dogs." He calls her and all her fellow Canaanites dogs. Somehow, even in the face of this insult, maybe because of her desperation to help her child, this Canaanite woman keeps her cool. She presses her case with this racist healer. She says, "Lord, yet even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." That got through. That broke through Jesus' racist assumption that the kingdom of heaven, God's love and God's healing were only for the true Jews, the lost sheep of Israel. And he healed the Canaanite woman's daughter. So, was Jesus a racist? It sure looks that way to me. This woman challenged his racist values and woke him up to the humanity of all people, even the Canaanite woman, even Gentile dogs. How could this happen? How could someone as wise and loving and generous as Jesus hold to such racist values? For one thing, all Jews felt that way. To be a Jew was to be set apart as chosen people, God's chosen tribe, the people saved by God, led by God with Moses through the wilderness, the people led into the promised land. These people were special and chosen. I want to be clear, though, that I am not saying that Jews are particularly or especially racist. Jews are no more or less racist than any other ethnic or religious group. Just look at how Christians have treated Jews. Look at how Muslims and Christians and Jews treat each other today. The point is that we are formed by the ethnic and religious and social cultures in which we live. I am, you are, and Jesus was. It's not his fault that he was a racist. But in that moment, confronted by the fierce determination of that Canaanite woman, that Canaanite mother, the human compassion of the situation broke through. And Jesus recognized her as a child of God, fully deserving of God's love, and her daughter as fully deserving of God's love and healing. It was not Jesus' fault that he was a racist, but he took responsibility for his racism. He took responsibility and he changed himself and he changed his actions. In fact, he changed his entire ministry from that point forward. The very next thing that he does after healing the Canaanite child is that he goes into the surrounding villages. Now, this is a predominantly Gentile region that they're in. And he begins sharing the good news of the coming of God's kingdom. He teaches and heals as before. He feeds as before. But now he is among the Gentiles in Tyre and Sidon. Shortly after this encounter with the Canaanite woman, Jesus performs his second feeding miracle, feeding 4,000 people in the wilderness. 4,000 Jews and Gentiles together. It was not Jesus' fault that he and his disciples started out as racists, but he took responsibility for that racism and transformed his values and his ministry. Are you a racist? I think that this is an important question in this time of civil unrest, in this time where we are confronted daily with the racial injustice of our society, the racial injustice in our schools, in our jobs, in our policing, in our healthcare system. Are you a racist? I know that I am. I have racist values and racist beliefs and racist prejudices. I also know that it's not my fault that I'm a racist. I was raised this way. I live in a racist country and participate in a racist culture. It's not my fault that I'm a racist, but I can take responsibility for my racism by learning to be an anti-racist. I can learn to recognize and challenge racism in our institutions. I can work to undo racism in our church and in our congregation. I can work to change my own values and behaviors. We can do this together. It's not easy. In fact, it's painful. It causes shame to admit or even consider that we might be racist. And it's very difficult to change. In fact, to make changes at this level, we have to admit that we're wrong. It's the only way we can begin to make those kinds of changes. But we can do that, and it's worth it. And Jesus has shown us the way. It's not our fault that we are racist, but we can take responsibility for our racism. And by doing so, we can heal our souls. We can make more room for God's love, compassion, and healing. We can open our hearts to new and life-giving relationships. I would like to invite you to participate in a program that was introduced, that is being offered by the Episcopal Church. It's a part of it's called the Sacred Ground Program, and this is a film-based program, film-based series on race and faith. It invites us into the difficult questions of racism and our faith, and it helps us to work through those questions to come to a better understanding so that we can work together to take responsibility for the racism of our culture. If you would like to be a part of the Sacred Ground program, send me an email and I'll make sure that you're included in the conversation. So, was Jesus a racist? I guess it depends on how we define racism. But it is clear that he did something about the racism that he encountered. And so can we. We can take responsibility for the racism of our world.